Okay, today I'm going to be attempting the Ciaglia style of soap making, which uses soap shreds or rebatches them in a way. I am going to take my shreds and mix them in with the oils and then add my lye. So this should be interesting. As you can see, I'm doing a white and pink theme. I had a ton of leftover white from a piping project, so I shredded up that. And then I had some extra pink soap dough. The consistency wasn't quite right, so I really wasn't going to use it. And the other, I wanted to just kind of give this a two-toned look, so they're very similar, but they are slightly different. I don't know if you can tell really. I'm hoping that might give it a bit of a more speckled look. We'll see. You can see I'm also going to be adding embellishments on top since we are allowed to do that in this challenge, which I am so very excited about. So I've made these soap dough flowers that are going to be going on top of my soap. So this is an interesting technique. I'm going to be adding 30% soap shreds to my batch from the weight of my oils. So what that meant was I needed to recalculate how much soap I needed in my base recipe to account for the extra soap I was adding. I am going to put up on the screen and talk you through the sizing of batches that I figured out. I'm using a 5-pound batch and I'm doing 2 layers. So basically I'm splitting it 2.5, 2.5. I have 30% soap shreds for each layer. So really I only need about 2 pounds of soap for each layer. I am going to give you a little bit of math here. You can disregard this. You can just kind of add the shreds and do what you want to do. You might have extra, you might have under. That's totally okay. There's not really a wrong way in some respects to do this. But if you're like me and you want to have everything figured out and make sure you have the right amount to fill your mold and do everything you want, then stay tuned for this section. So, the first thing I'm giving you is a cheat sheet. This is for basic recipe sizes. I normally have to do calculations, and they're typically based off of the weight of oils in a recipe and not the total weight of the recipe. So, years ago I created this sheet just so I had it as a reference, so I could easily calculate when I needed to know the weight of oils. I've done this for a 2, 2.5, 3, 4, and 5 pound recipe. Most molds are either a 2.5, a 3, or a 5 pound, so this should be what you need. If you wanted it for a different size recipe, let me know in the comments and I can help you figure that out. But I'm giving you this so you can come back to it if you ever need it, or if you're even just doing the calculations for the Ciaglia recipe, you can use this now. So the first thing is, how much do I need when it comes to the soap shreds? So with this technique, it's recommended that you don't exceed 40% of the weight of your oils. More than that, and it gets hard to work with. When I made this soap, I used 30%. I liked the look, I could work with my recipe, and I was really happy with it, so I stuck with that. So everything that I am giving you from here on out, like all the math that I figured out, is based off of using 30%. So if you wanted to use a different percentage, you would have to go back and do the math, but I am telling you how to do it, so don't worry. How do you determine the amount of soap shreds you will need to use? Pretty simple. Take the percentage of soap shreds you want in your recipe, multiply it by the weight of oils, and that's going to give you the total weight of soap shreds that you need to use. So, for example, I'm going to make a 2.5 pound batch. I want to use 30% soap shreds. So what I'm going to do is simply take 30% of 28 ounces, because that's the total amount of oils in my 2.5 pound batch, multiply that, and I get 8.4 ounces of soap shreds. So that's how much I'm going to need. Now, if I use a 2.5 pound batch and I add 8.4 ounces of soap shreds, I'm gonna have way more soap than would fill my 2.5 pound mold. In fact, I'm gonna have enough to fill basically a 3 pound mold. So what you need to do is kind of figure out how to resize your original batch. Now, you don't have to do this. You can just figure out how many shreds you need, make your batch, and the excess soap you could put into single cavities, use for another design. There are lots of options. So again, you don't have to resize your mold, but if you want it to be perfect and you don't want excess soap, then you're gonna need to resize your original batch. So how do you do this? Well, I've already done it for you. The math is complicated, and I even just kind of rounded these up and down. So you might be off by an ounce or two, but it's going to be pretty close. You're not going to have a lot of excess soap or be missing too much soap. So if my mold size is 2.5 and I am using 30% soap shreds, that means I'm going to need 8.4 ounces of soap shreds, and when I reformulate my recipe, I need it to be a 2 pound batch. Then I will end up with a 2.5 pound batch and everything will fit in my mold. If my mold size is 3 pounds, then I'm going to need 10.2 ounces of soap shreds, and when I reformulate my recipe, basically I'm going to use a 2.5 pound. Technically, you want to use a 2.4 pound recipe if you don't want any excess, but I wasn't going there. Like, I have my 2.5 pound recipe, so that's what I used. I'll have a little bit of extra soap, not a big deal. If you're making a 5 pound batch, then you need 16.5 ounces of soap shreds, and your new reformulated recipe size would be a 4 pound batch. So again, I've only done this for 30% soap shreds, but you can go ahead and do the math and figure it out for any other percent of soap shreds that you wanted to use. I'm giving you the recipes I used. This recipe is a slow mover, a really slow mover. It's predominantly soft oils, only about 15% are hard oils. Because of this, it's a low lather soap. It's not a huge lather, but it's a very gentle soap. I like the recipe. But what I really like about it is that it gives me a lot of time to work with it, and I was able to actually stick blend my mixture. I didn't have to do any whisking by hand, and I got my soap or my oils and lye to trace with the soap shreds, and it all worked beautifully. So here is the 2 pound recipe, the 2.5 pound recipe, the 3 pound, 4 pound, and finally your 5 pound recipe. So again, you can pause this, copy down this recipe if you want to use it. You don't have to. You can use your own recipe. I am just providing it because it's what I used in this tutorial and it worked beautifully. So I'm sharing it with you if you want to use it. Okay. So the first layer I am going to do will be pink. Then I'm going to add a mica line between the layers. And then I am going to do the white. So I'm going to basically add these shreds in, stick blend them. I'm going to add the tiniest bit of pink to this as well. Just in case the shreds don't cover it all. This pink should make sure that it's not like a neutral color base. So I'm going to, again, go add these, stick blend them. My temperature is at about 105 with the oil and the lye. So I'm gonna go over to my stick blender, which is not by this video, and stick blend these, and I'll be back to show you the results. Okay, so these have been shredded into the oil. You can see the size of the specks. I think that's as tiny as I'm gonna get them after stick blending for quite a bit. This recipe is more soft oils than hard oil, so it's a slow moving recipe. And I did that because there can be issues with figuring out trace in this getting thicker quicker and all sorts of just little headaches. So I was hoping with a slower moving recipe I would be able to stick blend the lye in as opposed to whisking. I don't really know how this is gonna go but we're gonna try it and see what happens. Okay, I'm back with my lye, so I'm just gonna check the temperature. This has gone down to 93 and this is at basically about 100, so it's 10 degrees difference. I'm gonna say it's okay to go ahead and add it in. So I'm gonna try stick blending it a little bit and then I'll come back and whisk it. So we'll see what that combination gives us. Okay, so this was stick blending it for about 30 seconds. I don't know if you can see. Of course, it looks like it's reached trace, but from what I've seen and watched and heard, it makes me a little leery to say that this is actually at trace. It's not too thick, so I think I'm gonna go back and try and stick blend it again a little bit more, see what happens, and then come back again. Okay, this was another 30 seconds of stick blending. I also added the fragrance because I almost forgot that, which that would have been very sad. It definitely looks thick, like pasty. Obviously when I drizzle it, it's leaving an impression. I'm trying to see if it looks like any oil is seeping out to say that it might be a false trace, but it really does look like it is blended. Can you see the kind of speckled look that this has from the two different color pinks? Actually really excited about that. I think it's gonna look pretty. And like, I really do think this is at trace, but I might go back, stick blend once more, and then pour and let it sit for a minute and see if any oil looks like it's seeping out of the mixture, which would give me an idea or a clue that it has not actually reached trace yet. That's kind of one of your biggest clues as to whether this is going to be, has actually traced or not, is if you let it sit for a minute, or if you look at the sides, does it look like oil seeping out, then your lye and your oils have not all mixed together. Okay, so I mixed this for another 30 seconds on high on my blender, and I think this is definitely trace now. Before, it looked like there might be some oils that were seeping out, but I think this is good. So I'm going to take the chance that it is and add it into the mold. you can definitely see the speckled look. I don't see any oil seeping right now, so I'm going to assume that this has reached trace. So again, I added a little bit of white colorant because I really do want to make sure that this is white. I'm going to add about a third of the soap shreds and I'm going to go stick blend them. Okay, so here are my oils with the white shreds blended in. So now I am going to add my lye water. This is about 30 seconds of stick blending. Well, it looks thick. I definitely don't think it's actually ready yet. I think it's gonna need more stick blending, just like the first layer did. So let's go mix some more. Okay. This isn't nearly as thick as the previous layer, and it has a little bit of a glossy shine to it, which makes me a little nervous to pour. This is about 60 seconds. I did a minute and a half with the first layer. So I think I need to pour or stick blend some more. My poor stick blender is getting a workout and a half. I don't think it's too happy with me right now. Okay, that looks definitely better, much thicker now. This has a consistency of, or what reminds me of grits, which I do not like grits. But look at that, it really looks nice and creamy. You can see the speckles. Much more finely blended in than if I were just adding it to my oil already mixed. So let's go ahead and pour and